Hi everyone, this is the Conflicted Critic back with another book review. And today's video is going to be really exciting because we're going to talk about history today, which happens to be my favorite subject. But before we delve into today's book any further, let me just tell you about a slight change or modification that I'm making to my videos from now on. And that change will be that I'll try to be bilingual in this video. That is, I'll be speaking in both English as well as my native Urdu. The reason behind this being the fact that I want more and more people to access this message. I want this message to be more approachable and, you could say available for as many people as possible, because the message or the purpose behind all of these videos is to stir a conversation, is to welcome arguments and difference in opinions. And I realize that that won't be possible if only a limited amount of people would be able to fully perceive the perspectives or the opinions that I'm trying to share through the books that I'm reading. So yeah, from now on, I'll try my best to make these videos more understandable, more comprehensible to everyone out there. So yeah, uh, before we waste any more time in our introduction, let's talk about today's book, which is Jinnah of Pakistan by Stanley Wolpert. Now, since a very young age, when I was in high school, in my O level, and then my A level, and then my university years, मैं हमेशा से ये बात सोचता था कि इवन दो पाकिस्तान स्टडीज़ एक ऐसा सब्जेक्ट है जो कि हर स्टूडेंट को पाकिस्तान में पढ़ाया जाता है एज अ कंपलसरी टॉपिक, चाहे वो किसी भी डिसिप्लिन में एनरोल्ड क्यों ना हो, लेकिन जब भी पाकिस्तानी स्टूडेंट से हिस्ट्री के बारे में बात होती है और जब भी किसी पाकिस्तानी इंडिविजुअल से हिस्ट्री के बारे में बात होती है, तो सिर्फ सरफेस लेवल नॉलेज के अलावा उनके पास एक एनालिसिस या क्रिटिसिज्म नहीं होता. तो उसकी वजह क्या है? उसकी वजह ये है कि हमारी टेक्स्ट बुक्स डिज़ाइंड ही इस तरीके से नहीं होती कि वो स्टूडेंट्स में क्रिटिकल एनालिसिस, आर्गुमेंट्स, क्वेश्चंस उजागर करें. स्टूडेंट्स को ये सब अपनी इंडिपेंडेंट रिसर्च के थ्रू करना पड़ता है. तो जब मैं भी ओ लेवल में था, मैं सोचता था कि इवन दो दीज बुक्स आर इनफ फॉर मी टू pass my exams, to make notes, to do revisions. But if I want to form an opinion about the history of the country that I live in, I need to, to go and find some other resource. And whenever I used to consult my colleagues, my teachers, the internet, one book always used to spring up in conversations and in recommendations, and the book was Jinnah of Pakistan by Stanley Wolpert. Now let's talk about the major thematic elements of this book. This book is basically a biography of our founding father, Mohammad Ali Jinnah. What I love most about this book is कि दूसरी biographies की तरह जो कि बहुत ही robotic हो जाती हैं, boring हो जाती हैं, ये book anecdotal evidence के साथ मोहम्मद अली जिन्ना की बायोग्राफी को नरेट करती है. यानी कि पहली बात तो ये chronological biography है from the very early years of Mohammad Ali Jinnah to his dying days. दूसरी बात यह है कि मोहम्मद अली जिन्ना की ज़िंदगी में जो भी कॉन्वर्जेशंस हुई, जो कि लीगल लेवल की कॉन्वर्जेशंस थी या पॉलिटिकल लेवल की कॉन्वर्जेशंस थी मेजर पॉलिटिकल लीडर्स के साथ, वो इस किताब में वर्ड टू वर्ड मेंशन्ड हैं. यानी कि ऑथर ने अपनी पूरी मेहनत लगा के, कोशिश लगा के उन कॉन्वर्जेशंस को रिकवर किया है from the archives, whether those archives be in England or the subcontinent, and he has presented them in this book in a chronological way. तो इस बुक को पढ़ते हुए कभी भी आपको एक बायोग्राफी की फील नहीं आती, बल्कि आपको एक स्टोरी बुक या एक नरेशन की फील आती है, which makes this book all the more exciting. We talk about Mohammad Ali Jinnah as an individual. इस पर कोई शक नहीं है कि वो एक एनिग्मेटिक और कैरिज्मेटिक पर्सनालिटी थे. यानी कि एक सेपरेट नेशन अचीव करना छोटी काविश नहीं होती, बल्कि सालों की जद्दोजहद होती है. लेकिन when you talk about the knowledge that we as Pakistanis possess about this venerable personality, हमारे पास मोहम्मद अली जिन्ना के बारे में सर्विस लेवल इंफॉर्मेशन के अलावा कुछ भी नहीं है. हमें नहीं पता कि मोहम्मद अली जिन्ना की इनिशियल पॉलिटिकल आइडियोलॉजी किस बेसिस पर ड्रिवन थी, कौन से ऐसे की इवेंट्स थे जिनकी वजह से उनकी पॉलिटिकल आइडियोलॉजी चेंज हुई, क्या पार्टीशन के टाइम पे उनकी पॉलिटिकल आइडियोलॉजी एक स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड मैनर में काम कर रही थी या फिर कुछ कन्फ्लिक्ट्स थे। तो इस बुक ने जिन्ना के इस कैरेक्टर को, जिन्ना की इस एवोल्यूशन को बहुत अच्छे तरीके से रीडर्स के सामने प्रेजेंट किया है। Now let's talk about the initial years or the formative years of the Jinnah that we know as a founding father today. During the early political years of Jinnah, Jinnah was a strong advocate of democracy, debate and discussion. यानी कि जिन्ना हमेशा ये चाहते थे कि जब भी कोई इशू डिस्कस हो, जब भी कोई पॉलिसी मेकिंग डिस्कस हो, तो वो एग्जीक्यूटिव काउंसिल्स और लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबलीज़ की चार दीवारी में हो। ऐसा ना हो कि पॉलिटिकल यूथ रिलीजियस स्लोगन्स से इंस्पायर हो के सड़कों पे निकल जाए। ऐसा ना हो कि पॉलिटिकल यूथ बैनिंग और अबॉलिशन की तरफ जाए, बल्कि जिन्ना हमेशा ये चाहते थे ड्यूरिंग हिज अर्ली ईयर्स कि यूथ ड्राइव हो डिबेट से, यूथ ड्राइव हो डेमोक्रेसी से, यूथ ड्राइव हो डिस्कशन से। एंड ड्यूरिंग हिज अर्ली ईयर्स जिन्ना वाज आल्सो अ वेरी पॉपुलर एंड वेरी वेल नोन एंड एस्टैब्लिश्ड फेस इन द अर्ली पॉलिटिकल असेंबलीज दैट द ब्रिटिश वर एबल टू ड्रॉ। तो वहाँ से लेके 1947 तक ऐसे क्या इवेंट्स हुए जिसकी वजह से जिन्ना की पॉलिटिकल आइडियोलॉजी में एक कन्फ्लिक्ट पैदा हुआ और ही स्टार्टेड encouraging his followers to strive for a separate, religiously driven nation. So, the first key event that Stanley Wolpert mentions regarding this shift in ideology is the Khilafat movement, and in support of the Khilafat movement, the Satyagraha or non-violence movement of Mahatma Gandhi. मोहम्मद अली जिन्ना इस पूरे मूवमेंट के सख्त खिलाफ थे। उनका सिर्फ़ और सिर्फ इख्तिलाफ मौलाना मोहम्मद अली जौहर और शौकत अली जौहर से नहीं था, बल्कि उनका मेजर पॉलिटिकल डिफरेंस महात्मा गांधी के साथ था। गांधी एक ऐसे फिगर थे जिनकी पॉलिटिकल स्टैंडिंग वैसे तो कोई भी नहीं थी, क्योंकि ना वो किसी असेंबली का पार्ट थे, ना वो कांग्रेस के एक रिकग्नाइज्ड पॉलिटिकल एंटिटी थे, बल्कि उस पार्टी के बाहर उनका इतना पॉलिटिकल इन्फ्लुएंस था कि Jinnah felt insecure कि without debate, without discussion, this man is able to gather so much following, is able to instigate so much of the political youth of the subcontinent to start a movement based on religion and ideology. So in his early exchanges with Gandhi regarding the Satyagraha movement, Jinnah stated, "I'm fully convinced that your methods must lead to disaster. But the actual new life that has opened up before the country is that we are faced with a government that pays no heed to the grievances, feelings, and sentiments of the people, that our own countrymen are divided. The moderate party is still going wrong, that your methods have already caused split and division in almost every institution that you have approached hitherto, and in the public life of the country, not only amongst Hindus and Muslims, but between Hindus and Muslims and Muslims." तो इस पूरे पैसेज से क्लियर हो जाता है कि जिन्ना की इनिशियल आइडियोलॉजी wasn't driven by religion, it was driven by democracy, it was driven by principles of equality and tolerance. But after this Khilafat movement, after this Satyagraha movement, Jinnah realized that there was one thing that you could tap into if you wanted to create a mass movement within the subcontinent, and that was religion. The youth was ready to chant and to travel for long distances, to put up slogans, to protest in the name of religion, in the name of religious movements, rather than investing time to learn and to educate themselves, to be capable enough to debate the British themselves in the councils and assemblies that they had created for the Indian youth. So Jinnah initially was strictly against these religio-political movements, but when he realized that there was a key to success in them, he slowly but surely started moving towards such a mass movement. और अब ये मास मूवमेंट अपने उरूज पे कब आया, जब 1935 में कांग्रेस ने अपनी पार्टी गवर्नमेंट फॉर्म करी। तो जब कांग्रेस ने अपनी गवर्नमेंट फॉर्म करी, इंस्टेड ऑफ standing with the secular principles that the Congress advocated very proudly in their political manifesto, they started practicing authoritarianism, yani ke majority rule. They started suppressing minorities in the subcontinent. They did not consider the Muslim League, as well as, most importantly, Mohammad Ali Jinnah as a political equal, because of the sheer majority that the Congress had in the subcontinent. और इस बात से ना कि सिर्फ मुस्लिम लीग को एज अ पॉलिटिकल एंटिटी नुकसान पहुंचा, लेकिन सबसे ज़्यादा नुकसान पहुंचा जिन्ना की इमेज को, बिकॉज जिन्ना वांटेड टू बी दैट person, that leader to whom millions of people followed, to whom millions of people would follow, or would be willing to give up everything. But that Congress win, and that Congress treatment of Jinnah and his political party meant that the Congress would not give the Muslims, would not give the Muslim League an equal political standing in any future dominion status that the British were able to endow to the Indians. तो उस 1935 इलेक्शंस और उसके रिपरकशंस के बाद वॉलपर्ट कहता है कि Jinnah's mind started being focused on advocating for a separate nation and a separate country. In the days leading up to the partition, the political stagnation that was there in the subcontinent is very well represented, or is very well portrayed in this book. Most importantly, the violence that happened in Bengal during these years on the instigation of Muslim League and Congress leaders, as well as the political stalemate that happened, is referenced in a series of discussions that happened between Jinnah as well as the key political leaders at that time, whether it be Nehru, whether it be Mahatma Gandhi. And most importantly, इस बुक में लॉर्ड माउंटबैटन का रोल बहुत एम्फसाइज करके बताया गया है, क्योंकि बेसिकली माउंटबैटन वाज सेंट टू द सबकॉन्टिनेंट टू हेल्प द पॉलिटिकल लीडर्स एट दैट टाइम टू रीच अ कंक्लूजन विद द हेल्प ऑफ Cripps and Lord Wavell, who were already there battling it out with the Indian leaders. और जब माउंटबैटन इंडिया आए और उन्होंने पॉलिटिकल लीडर्स के साथ बात करी, so he realized that the stagnation and the stalemate and the political enmity was so strong that there seemed no other solution than a partition, which was inevitable at that time. So Mountbatten famously told Liaquat Ali Khan during a conversation that I told him that the worst service I could do to India if I were her enemy or completely indifferent to her fate would be to take advantage of this extraordinary mental condition to force the completest partition possible upon them before going off in June 1948 and leaving the whole country in the most hopeless chaos. Yani ki Mountbatten realized that the partition would throw the entire subcontinent in economic, social, religious chaos. It will lead to millions of deaths. It will lead to a sustained period of economic stagnation. It will, basically, it will disrupt the future of the subcontinent as a whole. But the political differences were so high, and the leaders of that time were so egoistic that they did not see further than their own political ambitions. So, amidst all this chaos, amidst all this stagnation, Jinnah was the voice that stood firm with the partition, even though it wasn't the solution that Nehru wanted, it wasn't the solution that Mountbatten wanted, and it even wasn't the solution that Gandhi wanted. तो सवाल ये पैदा होता है कि why was Jinnah so adamant on a partition? A political visionary like him must have foreseen the economic impacts that might have had on a country. A political visionary like him must have seen the religious impact that must have had on a country on the basis of a partition driven by a particular religion and a particular sect. So, इस सवाल के जवाब में वॉलपर्ट कुछ ओपिनियंस पुट फॉरवर्ड करता है. वॉलपर्ट पहले ही आर्ग्यू करता है कि this was partly driven by Congress authoritarianism. He argues that the Congress wasn't able to deliver to its democratic promises and democratic principles during its time in power. and the Congress was not willing to concede any form of power from the center in a future government. ये एक basis of insecurity था, not only for the Muslims but for the Muslim League as a political entity, as well as for Jinnah, because Jinnah and the Muslim League considered themselves as political equals for the Congress, but the Congress wasn't willing to concede any type of position for them. And the second thing that Wolpert argues is the fact that Jinnah wanted a greater role for himself. Jinnah wanted to be at the forefront of the Muslim campaign. Jinnah wanted a conclusion, a fulfillment of a dream that he had witnessed during the early years of 1930s. And Jinnah also somewhere knew that time was up for him. The days were passing by, his health was deteriorating, and if the partition wouldn't have been possible, he would have died, a fallen symbol, a false hope. He wanted to achieve the dawn, or the hope that he had let the Muslims see, that he had let the Muslims envision, even if the dream was very far-fetched. And he went the extra mile in achieving a vision against all odds, even if the repercussions were extreme, even if it led to millions of deaths, even if it led to possibly years and years of economic, religious, and social regression. There's a very famous speech that Jinnah put forward on the eve of the partition in Karachi. One of the excerpts of the speech is, "You are free. You are free to go to your mosques or to any other place of worship in the state of Pakistan. You may belong to any religion, caste, or creed. That has nothing to do with the business of the state." And this particular excerpt is so widely quoted because the reality that we live in today in a religiously driven country like Pakistan is very different from the ideals that have been put forward in this speech. This speech advocates secularism, but we all know, and the political history of the country shows, that Jinnah created a country on the basis of religion, on the basis of the defense of religion, on the basis of the upstanding and withstanding of a religion. So why did he say this? Why did he say this particular, or why did he deliver this particular speech at such a particular occasion when millions and millions of people were migrating from one place to another solely to protect their faith and to protect their religion? And Wolpert expertly comments against this speech. What was he talking about? Had he simply forgotten where he was? Had the cyclone of events so disoriented him that he was arguing the opposition's brief? Was he pleading for a united India on the eve of Pakistan? Before those hundreds of thousands of terrified innocents who were slaughtered, fleeing their homes, their fields, their ancestral villages, and running to an eternity of oblivion or a refugee camp in a strange land? So yeah, this basically, in Wolpert's eyes, is a conflict. It's a contradiction. Jinnah, in his speech, delivered the type of country, the type of dominion that the Congress wanted. But Jinnah wanted a country for Muslims. Congress wanted a country for everyone, despite their religion, despite their faith. So, was this contradiction temporary? Was this contradiction only for that particular speech? Or did this political contradiction lie in the ideology of Jinnah? इस सवाल का जवाब अनफॉर्चुनेटली सिर्फ मोहम्मद अली जिन्ना ही दे सकते हैं, लेकिन ये बात तो तय है कि इस कॉन्ट्रडिक्शन की वजह से, इस आइडियोलॉजिकल डिफरेंस की वजह से, वी एज अ कंट्री हैव सफर्ड, वी एज अ कंट्री हैव undergone a lot of contradictions in our political development, in our constitutional development. It's very unfortunate that a man like Jinnah, with his political experience, with his political caliber, with his enigma, with his strength of debate, with his strength of discussion, with his strength of reform, with his strength to create policies, wasn't able to build a country after the few fledgling years. Even though there was a huge disadvantage at the time Pakistan was created, Jinnah solely had the willpower to create a country out of nothing. And he surely would have had the sole power to create a better country than we are now. Jinnah of Pakistan is a very important book for the youth of Pakistan to read because it categorically states a lot of facts, a lot of rational theories, about the development of our country, the development of India, the political history of the subcontinent. And most importantly, it also talks about Jinnah as a human. It talks about the relationships that Jinnah had with his sister, with his wife, with his daughter, how his political journey affected his health, affected his relationships. It also talks about the hobbies that Jinnah possessed regarding fancy cars, fancy suits, his keen interest in real estate, his keen motivation to build mansions wherever he went, uh, and it sort of lets you form that connection with a man briefly know that we briefly know, and we know on the surface, but we don't know the depth to which this man suffered, to which this man was tormented, was conflicted, and also the depths to which this man thought and envisioned to basically single-handedly create a country out of nothing. So yeah, a highly recommended book for history lovers, for people who want to read about Pakistan, for people who want to know about the venerable, enigmatic Muhammad Ali Jinnah. So yeah, uh, before we meet again with another book, with another book review, have a wonderful, wonderful reading experience. Goodbye.